Okay, good morning. I'd like to call our facility committee meeting to order. Thank everybody who is in attendance. Noting that the three committee members, three board members of the committee are in attendance. I have received no public comments. Good morning. Do you want to speak? Okay. Welcome. Oh, I forgot, we need to approve the agenda. So
Second.
all in favor, say aye. Aye. No public comment, so we are moving into the Heritage Elementary School update on the schedule and the finances, Steve.
Well, thank you, Joan. First of all, I'm just going to ask Rebecca to go back a couple months. And this was a presentation that Jay from Vogel shared with the facility committee and then shared it with the board at the August board meeting. It was an update on the budget for the school, the guaranteed maximum price, and where bids had gone through at that point. One of the things that Jay did share with the board at that time is there was a slide called additional savings opportunities. And there were examples that were listed on this slide. And the one thing to note about this slide is because the guaranteed maximum price was established that evening, which was the maximum cost that the elementary school would end up being as far as the financial cost of the district. These savings were not reflected at all because this process was still ongoing. So you haven't yet seen how any of this has played itself out. So that's what takes us to this agenda item. So Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind going back. So we have this report called Owner Contingency Tracker that we're going to share with you on a consistent basis through the remainder of this elementary project. And I just want to talk you through it for a moment. So there's two columns. One's called owner contingency, one's called CM or construction manager contingency. And the construction manager contingency is typically used for items beyond the control of the contractor at the time that the guaranteed maximum price was established. An example of that might be when we're putting the final parking lot in place, there might need to be some additional work done to get everything even, some undercutting, etc. So that would come out of there. But to the right, you see what's called the owner contingency. An owner's contingency is really basically scope that we've asked to change. For some reason, we've asked for something to be different. An example of things that we've asked to be different are those cost savings items that were on that spreadsheet. So off to the description column, you would see a variety of different items listed there. If you want to look at as an example, the one that says removal of sunshades, that was on that list from that PowerPoint back in August. And so Randy approved the removal of those items with sunshades from the design of the school at a savings of $141,000. So now you see in that column owner contingency, a positive number is actually a credit. It builds the contingency and a negative number draws down from it. The largest one that I know Randy has talked about before is that cast stone manufacturer. That's almost a $400,000 item credit back to the district. And then as we were going through the process of value engineering at the middle school, we discovered that the security camera video footage was called out at a 60-day storage instead of 30. We typically only need 30. So we asked them to create a credit for that or change the scope at the middle school. But then we asked them for a credit on that at Heritage, because we don't need it there either. So that's another credit of $26,000. At the top, you see what are called construction bulletins. Generally speaking, what those items are is Vogel reaching out to EUA and asking them to clarify something on the design to make sure they're getting it right. So there are a number of things that we hear about in our meetings every other week where they're saying, as an example, we have to move this foundation by 4 inches to make these shades work in the library. Vogel will reach out to EUA to confirm that the exact dimensions of that design. And then they will tell us it's a $500 change to do that or $1,000 change. And then they send those to Randy too. So you'll see so far at Heritage, we've actually accrued an additional 505 or 9 in additional funds that have been created at that school, which is a real positive. So now the total contingency between the 2 pots of money is over $3 million. And we're all the way into October as far as the construction process. So we feel pretty good about it, but we're going to use this report to just keep you informed as to what's going on at the school. Everything has to go to Randy for approval. Even if it is the CM contingency, like they have to get Randy's approval on basically use of contingency. Do you want to add anything, Randy?
No, I think that's just the process we follow. And if you recall, we have different levels that we approved for this project as far as when we have to bring things to the back of this committee or to the board. And we haven't hit anywhere near those numbers. So we've been able to deal with everything internally. It's gone really well. We're in a really good place right now with it.
And ultimately, both our hope and our team's hope with Vogel and the UA is to save as much of the contingency fund as we can. Because, we obviously have other work that we could be doing across the district with extended maintenance lists. So our goal is to do whatever we can to save these funds. And we're always evaluating things that come in front of us with the thought about bigger picture. Does it make sense to do that here? I think the video storage is a good example where we're saying, well, it doesn't, just because we have referendum money, doesn't make sense to go to 60 days worth of storage at an elementary school. We don't even have that at the high school. So we're always just thinking about across our buildings, what is the good use of our money? Because that $26,000 that we're saving on video storage could go towards lighting in an elementary classroom at Prairie. So we don't want to spend money in one school that we really don't need to.
There's probably a point where I would recommend we kind of hold on spending any of the dollars that are left over from this project. We'll be starting the middle school. The difference between the middle school and this project, this was on a pure site. The other one has a lot of stuff underneath that we may discover things that weren't initially thought about. And so I recommend any contingency here, we probably make sure that we get past some of the critical stages of the middle school and then open up when I really want to go.
And then as far as schedule, that was the other component we had on this agenda item. Every 2 weeks at our owners meetings out at the site, they go through the schedule with us. Everything remains towards a date of Vogel reaching substantial completion on July 31st. They're not necessarily weeks ahead. They're not weeks behind. We think target continues to be July 31st. We do little things here and there to pick up a day, or rain might cause us to lose a day. But generally speaking, we're really pleased with, Vogel's team keeps their eye on that July 31st date and makes decisions accordingly. And we continue to check in with them every 2 weeks as to, where that's at and how that's going. So questions about schedule or the financial update?
Appreciate knowing this.
Just one question, you took out the sunshades of 140,000. Where were those?
Those were shades that they're not like a shade like in a window, they're a shade above a window sill on the outside. And they're meant to be on sides of a building where you get more intense sunlight. As we kind of vetted it out, we didn't feel that the value of it was worth the dollar amount. So it was, if the sun is at such a level, it might reduce some level of glare. we didn't feel that, we didn't have those on the other buildings, and we kind of reviewed it and didn't think that was a place we thought we could have savings without really impacting any of the other integrities.
As we go through the development of these buildings, are they're not they're green buildings or as green as possible? Is that the plan as you go forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And everything's got the geothermal, they've got all the different kind of insulating factors and such that we've used them on. I think of the intermediate school as kind of a model. It's either that or at a better level. But the sunshades is one that, as we kind of looked at the info around it, didn't feel that was necessarily probably the place we could put it or needed to put it in.
Okay, so the next item in Heritage is the solar system options. And this is certainly an example, Jack, of a much better investment from, the perspective of energy efficiency in a school. The sunshade return on investment is minimal at best. This is one that can be actually calculated out. Even though this is, let's say, in the 12 to 15-year range, depending on the size of the system, it actually has very real, calculations as far as return on investment for green and energy savings. So the committee had a number of questions after our last meeting. John and I have been working with Westfall. They're the electricians on the site. The board also has approved them to do this project. There were a number of questions that they asked, and so we kind of put the questions and the answers in here. One of the things, after taking a look at the questions and the answer, the one that we really resonated to, Rebecca, if you could scroll down a little bit to like number 3, that really wasn't on our radar, and I think Jack might have brought it up, or remember this committee brought it up, like if we go with the lower of the 3 systems, what do you have to do? So like at the future, you could go in and put a larger system in. And they answered that question with the technical answer as far as like what they actually have to do to prep it. And then down at the bottom, they said the investment would be a little less than $10,000. So after looking at that, we think it would make a lot of sense to go with the smaller of the 3 systems that they proposed, but add that additional investment of the $9,867. So to Randy's point, when we get to the end of this project, if things have gone really well at the middle school and we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish in other buildings for maintenance, we could always circle back to this and expand the size of the solar system at Heritage, because that investment will have been made, the $10,000 will have been made up front. So that puts us in a position to be able to make a decision right now to have a system up and running and have expansion capabilities in the future. Given the fact that we're still early in this overall project scope, we think it makes sense to go with the lower cost of the 3 options. We appreciate the idea of discussing the infrastructure, because that will allow us to come back to this at a later point. In fact, we'd like to do something similar at the middle school as well, get a quote from them to expand it at a later date. So our thoughts would be to go with the lower of the 3 systems, but spend the infrastructure costs. But we'd be certainly open to your thoughts and feedback as to where you would want to go with this.
Motion to move forward to the recommendation.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you for the work.
Appreciate that.
So capital project.
So the first thing I would like to talk about under this item is, again, just a reminder of our tracking sheet. So every time we meet, thank you, Rebecca. We're going to just continue to update this. We have a version, just in case if you would prefer it, where in the future where we can double click on where it says approved at blank board meeting, and then it lists everything that you approved at that meeting. This is kind of the shortened version, but there's also a version that's expandable if you ever wanted to see that instead.
I think that would be, good, because if the public sees these, they can.
Sure,
see what
reference
these,
which ones they are.
So reference these dollars.
Sure, so we can include that one in there. It'll just be a little bit of a longer document. And again, this is just the process we came up with. To track where we're at, and as a reminder, we are at $3.9 million in funds available. Those are funds available district-wide on maintenance. The one thing that we have added into here, just to put it somewhere, the board hasn't necessarily taken action on this, but back in August, when Vogel presented their updated numbers for Heritage, they pulled out 1.12 million from that project. Not contingency money, just pulled it out from savings from the bidding process. And we parked it here just so we don't lose track of it. Ultimately, the board will have to weigh in on what to do with savings on Heritage or the middle school, but that's why that line says 1.12 million on 814 and is added in. Because we wanted to put it into this bucket of money because it's not needed at Heritage anymore. So that's why it's 3.8 million. Everything that's been approved is listed there. What has been still ongoing for review, as you know, we approved Rattler to do continued design work on the new varsity softball field, so that's still ongoing. But as far besides Rattler and their work and looking at work on athletic fields, we don't currently have anything pending other than a couple of things we're going to talk about. But this is our tracking sheet. Jack will change it to have more of the detail on there, and we'll continue to share this with you each month.
So you're just gonna change it so that when you're hyperlinking this.
I'll change it so that under each one, you will see the approvals of that meeting. So just will make this a little bit longer, but then you'll be able to see a little bit more, just reminders of what's been approved. All right, thank you, Rebecca. Let's go back to the main meeting. So that if you can go back to A for a moment. So A is John having a chance to share with you the work his team has been doing since last spring. So if you remember last spring, we presented capital projects to this committee and then ultimately to the board. This is a report on those projects. And so there's a column that shares what was requested at the time. There's a column that shares where it's at. The far right says whether it's done or not. It's broken down by school. We haven't had a chance yet with all the work at Heritage to kind of circle back to this and show you where all this is at. So John's available to answer any questions, but any highlights or anything you want to share, John?
We pretty much touched on it. The far right column is the status where we're at. Great team. Again, Danette and Scott are in the room, so thanks to these guys. I was helping coordinate and pay for and push these items to with us.
So it looks like he's adding money, what are you guys gonna do for the rest of the year?
That's why we're here. So that may lead us into that discussion, Jack. You guys have any questions on these items or where we're at with any of these items?
Thank you, Rebecca. If you want to go back to the main agenda, please.
So the middle school,
So if I could ask Tiffany to come up, and if you have questions on the quotes, Scott's here because he's done the work on that, so he'll be able to help us with questions on the quotes. Tiffany shared with us administratively that there's a request coming out of the middle school for consideration of a project to create a better situation between a special education classroom and the adjoining restroom. And Scott went out and got the quotes in anticipation of this meeting and bringing it to you. Basically, it's a project to directly connect the classroom to the restroom. In the attachment, we actually have the architectural plans for the school that shows where it is, and it shows the connection between the two rooms. And this one's the quote, so like the first page will have the quote. Scott went out to there's three different components to it. There's the construction part from Vogel to basically go between the two rooms. There's H&R carpeting, and then there's the wall mats from Paddock. Rebecca, would you mind grabbing the other one for a moment so they can see the. Yeah, if you could see if you can turn it. Or you can maybe turn it on your iPad, but basically in the middle there is a room that is an adjoining restroom, and we're looking to connect the two of them together. So I don't know, Tiffany, if you have anything you wanted to add?
I was just gonna add, I mean, I'm sure all been like to the intermediate school, and if you look at the plans for Heritage, like anytime there's a special ed space in general now always has a bathroom included in it. For important reasons, and without giving too much information about the individual student, it's just it just is really critical that the student has this individual need. And when the student was at the intermediate school, it was fine because that's exactly how everything was set up. So we come to the middle school, there's not very many bathrooms, so we keep adjusting and changing them in terms of being able to meet student needs. But this one, just as we've gotten to know the student better at this building, really seeing this as a critical need. And the student will be there for multiple years, obviously, and then we have other students coming up that can certainly benefit from that same.
This is on the first floor of the middle school, back by the special ed.
Correct. Yep, right there.
So when are the middle school will be open in 25, 26. So this is like a 2-year.
Two-year thing, but I don't see this, I still see this being utilized when it's part of
Oh,
high
yeah.
school, so I don't see this as being any sort of a project now that only has a 2-year lifespan. I think this is part of, it'll be applicable as we transition that school over to high school.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
Because you're gonna need spaces like this, and so I think that's gonna fit in well with future plans.
So you're proposing that this be done soon, like while people are here.
If possible, my ideal world would be that little end of October fall break. Now, I have no idea if contractors could do that, but that would be my perfect world, so.
Scott's saying.
Days.
Well, you do this. Thursday, Friday. 4 days.
I think when you look at bathroom facilities for special ed kids, one of them is the adjacency of the classroom.
Yeah.
Two, it's the dignity of the student being able to go in there without others being visibly knowing what's going on, and particularly if there are challenges with the child. So I think that there's great benefit to what Tiffany's proposing, and to Jack's point, I see this applicable in the years beyond 2026.
Is this a single bathroom, or is it is it multi?
It's a
stall?
it's just a single bathroom, but it's a large bathroom, so we can get lifts and those types of things. So it was designed for wheelchair accessibility and those types of things. So it's a large bathroom. We just want to connect it to the adjoining classroom.
If you recall, several years ago, we added one to the lower level at TLC, where we expanded one out. This already has space, this just needs the connectivity. And then, given some of the needs of the kids who use it, some of the coverage on the walls and such.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, Tiffany, for being so proactive always.
Maybe I would have preferred your motion, tell Scotty it's 2 days.
Oh, yeah.
2 days. Inclusive of Scott.
I'll have to figure out when. Help us, Rob.
Now, how long does the project take? Is it a month? Is is it a?
Scott, what's your thought on timing? Jack's wondering like
Well,
reality to get something like
Reality.
that done.
I mean, to do flooring, to do the wall construction in the door, and then all the padding. I mean, that's 3 different contractors, and the door itself will probably take a few days. That all,
So are we?
again, it all depends on the contract.
Yeah.
You know,
Is it at the end of the quarter or?
We just have a couple breaks coming up is what we have.
We-
have
we
a fall
do.
break, then we have one.
I would have to talk to Vogel first of all to see what their schedule would be, if they have any availability. And then
Is this done now over Christmas shutdown?
that's possible if Vogel has people working. That is possible. Now, the padding. Padding and flooring, you know, that's another, the flooring might take 2 days. The padding would take more.
We also have those 3 days before Thanksgiving where staff are here for staff development, but we don't have students. So that's what Tiffany's alluding to.
The other thing too, Tiffany, is if you wanted or could afford to shut it down. I know
So for that class.
that classroom down for a day or two, maybe we could punch it in quicker. That's not my.
Okay.
The door would require
Disturbing the classroom,
Yes.
the other, the padding, the flooring and
Not so much.
the internal work, if we could do it. Close the bathroom down.
Right. Right.
Thank you. The next item is the softball field project.
So Nick had the opportunity to meet last week with softball booster group. Nick is with girls tennis today, so couldn't be here as well. But Joanne's here. You had a chance to meet with Nick, right? Part of that last week. So what we're looking to do is have a partnership between the district and the softball booster group to work together to look for opportunities to improve the new varsity field behind the middle school. So attached, you'll find a letter that we're hoping to, facilitate that partnership and get that discussion moving forward. Rebecca, would you mind grabbing that? Joanne, are you willing to come up and talk a little bit about it?
Sure.
You just maybe want to cover some of the highlights of what your group's thinking about?
Sure. In the past few years, we've had fundraisers with selling banners on our field, and we've been pretty successful with that. I know some other sports have sold banners at a higher price and they're not selling them, so we want to continue to do that. Considering the cost of the banner, we may raise it somewhat. We're also looking at, we have a younger parent group. Some of the parents from the youth program have been discussing fundraising ideas. And they're talking about different ways to get the community back to the games, to watch the games. I mean, they have some ideas about auctioning off the first pitch or having younger players be partnered with high school players just to bring their families in. We're talking about when we have the fields built, the press box built, that we would ask local businesses if they would like to help fund this. We are not not-for-profit or nonprofit organization. So we don't know if we need to seek that or if we can help. If we could piggyback on another sports, I guess baseball has one, since we're like sports, seeking fundraising opportunities. We talked about having Tori Miller, he has a daughter in the program. He wants to come up with a way to have things like softball racing, like they have at the Waunakee Brewers, where families can donate something to have their child be one of the softballs that's racing around in one of the areas. Talked about asking Pauline Fence. He works with a construction agency And he feels that, some of the quotes that were in, the report, that we can maybe seek funding from local businesses, Quality Fence for the fencing. I know Dane Manufacturing was mentioned, to see if they would like to partner and contribute towards the fields. So we just need more guidance and information on how to do all of that. The money to do the ADA sidewalk from the path to the field or the parking lot to the path. We feel that, the school would be responsible for helping us with that. But the other items we can try to raise. We think that the softball field, fencing, it would not have to be replaced right now. We feel that it meets the current needs, so.
Part of what we've done in the past, if you go back to our policies, we have, before there's any large scale fundraising that takes place with regards to facility improvements, we always bring that here.
Yes.
And that's really what we're doing here, bringing forth really a request, so that as the softball program is raising funds, that there's a purpose for it. And those are things that we're in favor of partnering.
I know Nick went over the guidelines as to what needs to go through him and then at a money value, what needs to go above him. So we have that written down and we'll work with that.
So just kind of as a reminder about where this is, so Rattler is currently working on the designs for things like the batting cages. What would be the best location for putting them? Also, we'd have to have state approval of a plan to build the press box storage area, so that's in process. And while that is in process, which will probably take a little bit of time this fall, we've been able to start the dialogue with the softball boosters about partnership opportunities to then ultimately be able to bring back to this committee what we're seeing from Rattler and ideas for beginning to work on those improvements. We certainly appreciate your willingness to meet with Nick and your group and think creatively. And there definitely were some ideas on here where I thought, oh wow, nobody's tried that before. That looks like a really cool idea. So there's some new ideas here. And to Randy's point, we want to make sure as board members are comfortable with, some of these ideas and having them out there representing them. And if there's anything that you're seeing that causes you, concern or wanting to discuss more, we'd be happy to do that. But certainly there's some ideas like that first pitch that are very creative and things we haven't really tried before, but we're just wanting to make sure that you feel comfortable with what you're seeing up here for moving forward.
Got two things. One, in the designing the press conference or press box, we need room for more equipment. Are we considering that? So that we can have a bigger purpose where we can put some equipment in there. And the other thing, now that we got lights, maybe we can have some evening games and, you can sit down and take a look at, go to the Mallard scheme, how do they do things, right? To get fans out of the game, so forth, and we don't have to solve that problem right now, but just a suggestion.
The quote or the estimates for the press box were to replace the existing. And currently the press box, the lower floor is all for equipment. So we would hopefully have that same area. And then the upstairs is the press box area.
I would just suggest making it big enough, plan for the future, because we're gonna need more equipment. How do we, if we're gonna do this, let's, kind of look a couple years down the road and, what more space do we need, from the maintenance, not just for the baseball, but for the softball, but other equipment that we have out there. Sure, thank you, Jack.
And this is just relevant for your involvement, your parental involvement. I think in general, Waunakee is really fortunate for the support that we do get from our parents, and ultimately that positively impacts our kids and our youth and our community. So I really appreciate your involvement and the whole booster club involvement, because we wouldn't be able to provide some of these opportunities for our kids without that. So that's awesome. And I think from a school perspective, I think moving forward would be really great to have some sort of process or, policy or standardization of how we move forward with facility improvements and what that will look like moving forward, because I think it will just streamline the process and make things a little easier, and we're not reinventing the wheel every time we have fundraising opportunities. So if we can establish on our end some sort of process for fundraising, or what the partnership looks like, or who's responsible for what moving forward, what our needs are for all of our facilities in athletics and extracurriculars, that might help with some of these discussions that we have to move them forward.
I guess the other thing too is, instead of creating more 501c3 companies, you partner with the school district. That's a charitable donation, right? So I think, partnering with the school district, and it's a Waunakee sport, right? High school sport. I think, that's gonna save you, fund the money to set this thing up, and then once you have it, you're gonna do some auditing. There's a lot of requirements for that. That now you have to raise money to pay for that, and it doesn't go to the kids. So, I guess I would keep that in mind and partner with the school district to do that. And those are your funds, so if you raise them, they go into a special account that's earmarked, for you. Got a policy on that, so it's not like the school districts can use them for whatever they want.
We did have that as part of our conversation with Nick, and we will be scheduling a meeting to see what the next step for that is, if we partner with the school or seek our own. I know that the new booster board handbook has a lot outlined in there that will be followed.
And just from my standpoint, I'm not excited about all these 501c3 companies that are starting out. Because they're high school sport too. They're Waunakee sports. And without Waunakee, you wouldn't need a booster club.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
That you're doing.
It's exciting to see the youth excited about softball again.
So
I think that hadn't been the case in a while, and a lot of students sought club ball, but now Waunakee, the younger students are playing right in Waunakee. It's good to see that again.
Thank you. We would look at approval of the plan that we have in front, and then we'll take it to the board next week, so we can all be in sync.
motion to approve as presented.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So the last item is capital projects that are being funded.
Yeah, this is just more of just a general discussion to get some feedback from you. So under the topic of capital projects, we first showed that tracking sheet as far as the funds available and what as a committee has been approved as we've gone through the months. You also saw the report from the facilities department on where they're at with completing the projects that were presented to the board last spring. And where we're at now is we have the capacity to propose additional work. And we wanted to get your perspective on, as a committee, are you willing to see additional projects coming forward at this time? Is your preference to ask us to hold off and develop a list for maybe February, March? Because we have the ability to do this in whatever manner you feel is most appropriate. So we could, as an example, bring forward some additional HVAC projects. We could bring forward some LED lighting projects in our elementary schools. Or we could wait until the spring and show them to you on a much larger list. So I guess what we're just trying to have a discussion from your perspective on is, do you want to put a pause on seeing any projects in front of you for a bit? Or do you have a willingness for us to be putting things in front of you over the next couple of months and bringing it to you in smaller chunks? So
I would suggest smaller chunks, you know, and you know, what I would do with this list is, you know, what's the priority? What has to be done today? You know, so that, you know, HVAC seems like it's reasonable. I don't know what that's gonna be, but it seems like a reasonable, you know, obviously roof patching, you know, things like that. But if you prioritize this stuff, on what's the most important to the least important, I would think that would be the outcome of that.
How do items come on this? I agree. But how do we determine items that are on, I mean, obviously there's a need for roof or HVAC or whatever, but are there items out there that, you know, like, what's our process for an item, for an action item to be given?
So Scott and I meet weekly
Okay.
on these items. A lot of the items that you see in the, if you scroll down a little bit in the list, are brought to us either for head custodians or teachers or staff. And through Scott's eyes, when we look at, when we're out to the buildings and we look at what's going on in the buildings, we prioritize what could be a safety hazard or falling apart or not working properly. So those kind of rise to the list right away. And then, like Steve said, the larger items like the LED lighting, the bigger projects that we can also work with our contractors and partners on, we can bring those through as well in our partner coordination.
And ultimately, Katie, we have a very large list that we spent quite a bit of time developing that has all of the major systems, whether it's lighting, HVAC, carpeting, documented on according to like a life cycle. So typically, like when we brought the HVAC projects earlier in 2023, they were the most dated. Like the air conditioning unit at Arboretum was one that needed the most service, and one of the most dated ones that we had goes to the top of the list. But we have extensive lists beyond what you see in these smaller lists that really capture things like HVAC, lighting, carpeting, you know, other forms of flooring, parking lots, roofs, whatever, in a priority order. Which is why we brought you the middle school room before for the project Scott managed this summer, which was like the worst of the roofs that we have. But then as we would evaluate things, Scott and John and their team would sit and look at like, all right, between roofing, lighting, you know, flooring, HVAC, which would be the next major projects of those that should go up to the top of the list. And it's really based on, you know, let's say if it's a roof, what's leaking, you know, what are we hearing from contractors? If it's HVAC, what continually needs to be repaired? And then evaluating, you know, oftentimes, is the roof worse than the air conditioning at Arboretum, or is it the other way around? And then really trying to bring to you what we believe are the most critical off of the lists. But we just in general wanted to make sure you were comfortable, because we believe the team has capacity to start moving through additional projects, but wanted to make sure you were comfortable if we continue that work in the next couple of meetings, as opposed to like holding it all until the spring.
I think one of the things, bringing smaller chunks, what you're doing is better planning and utilization of facilities. And I think that Steve was alluding to when we built the intermediate school, you know, we work to put everything in there, right? So, you know, drinking fountains, door latches, you know, it was very detailed, you know, because when you start looking at maintenance going forward, you know, all of this major things went in at one time, and you can't handle that at one time. So you might say, okay, from a drinking fountain, it's got a 10-year useful life, so And you can say, okay, I'm gonna replace 5 this year, 5 next year, things like that, so. Give the maintenance group a better understanding of what they should be looking at going forward, and hopefully we're still doing that. You know, we bring these other buildings online. So it gives you a better opportunity to plan.
Yeah, thank you for providing context to this list. I'm sure you all, if we are familiar with how it's established, I appreciate you taking the time to walk me through that.
So in general, I'm hearing a willingness for us to continue working on these projects and having the team continue to evaluate them and then just bring them forward in smaller increments as opposed to like a huge list at some point, okay?
So, John, would you feel this list is kind of in priority order as was going?
I do, correct, yeah. One of the other items to add on to what Steve was talking about was fault tolerance, so.
Yeah.
Safety and fault tolerance, like
Yeah.
for air conditioning systems.
Right.
So those folks to surface.
And I feel, you know, personally, I think you know how to utilize your team the best and continuing with these projects if we have the funding.
Great.
Seems to be.
Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback. I think that was it, Rebecca, if I remember correctly. Yep.
Okay, so, everyone put in the meeting,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor, say aye. Thank you.
All for that for another half hour.
What?